So if you're like me, you've been eyeing this DJI Osmo 3 for rollers for quite some time, and maybe you were actually able to get your hands on one. In this video, I'm going to tell you guys the 7 important settings that you guys need to change to make sure that this is giving you buttery smooth rollers that you've been seeing all over the internet. Now, it's not that hard, so we're going to dive into it right away. Now, the first thing that you need to change on your DJI Osmo Pocket 3 is you're going to set your settings to 4K 24 frames per second. This is going to give you the most cinematic-like quality, and what this really means is it's like real-life motion blur. So when you wave your hand or when a car is driving by, it looks the same as our eye. If you are shooting in horizontal mode, you're going to have full 4K 16:9, which is what you're seeing right now, 16:9. Or if you want to, you can set this up so you can shoot vertical mode, and this is going to now shoot in 3.3K. There are some interesting ways you can get full frame 4K, and that's if you tilt this sideways. Now you're technically getting full frame 4K, but for me, honestly, if I'm using 3.3K and I'm posting to Instagram, that's more than enough, because most of the time I actually export my video at 1080p to fit Instagram better. The second thing that you're going to do is you're going to swipe over from the right side of that screen. You're going to tap into the Pro settings. What this allows you to do now is select the most ideal settings for your rolling shots. First of all, you want to make sure to switch over to manual settings, and I'll tell you the exact settings you want to set in a second. Additionally, I highly recommend using the D-Log M color profile. Now, if you don't know how to color grade flat footage, that's okay. DJI has their own LUT that you can apply in post-production. In fact, even if you're just sending the footage directly from this to your phone, the Mimo app, which we'll get into at the end, also has a color correction LUT inside the app, so you can send it back to your phone color corrected. Now, for my color settings, I set my white balance to auto. If you guys are shooting in consistent conditions and you're outside, you can actually hit auto white balance, change this to manual white balance, and it'll actually show you what the current color temperature is, and then you can set it at that color temperature, then it won't change. This will stop the colors from fluctuating throughout the shot if you're going under bridges into different lighting conditions, those kinds of things. It'll keep it very consistent, which in many scenarios is actually what you want. I turn off all the glamour effects, I don't want that, and then I make sure that my focus mode is on continuous. That way, if the car is moving back and forward, this thing is still tracking that subject. Now, the third thing that you need to do is tap into those manual settings. So we're going to hit that exposure button. Now, this is the most important setting, is that you need to change your shutter speed to 1/50. What this does is it doubles our shutter speed of 4K 24 frames per second. You need to double your shutter speed in order to get that cinematic blur. Another example, if you guys are shooting in 4K 60 frames per second on your Osmo Pocket 3, you want to come into manual mode and switch your shutter speed to 1/120. Again, double your frame rate. I don't need to go into the science of this, but really this is just how you get that cinematic feel. It's natural to the human eye, so that's why we're setting it this way. Now, there's 3 settings in the Osmo Pocket 3 that you need to get proper exposure. In fact, these are the same 3 settings in any camera that you need to get exposure. The first way that you get exposure in is through the lens. Now, this lens is fixed at an aperture of f2. What that means is that the lens is wide open and it's letting in a lot of light. The next setting that we get to adjust is the shutter speed, which we need to set at 1/50 if we want that buttery smooth roller. Now, this leads me into the fourth thing that you need to change. We've got our shutter speed and we've got a fixed aperture of 2.0 on the lens, and that brings us to our ISO. What ISO is in cameras is essentially adding artificial light. So if you've already got light intake to your lens at an aperture of f2 and we've changed our shutter speed to 1/50, we're controlling 2 light input sources. The third one is ISO. Now, the cool thing about this camera is it lets you set a range between 50 and 100, or 50 and 200, or 50 and 400, whatever you want, really. Now, I highly recommend setting this to 50/200 or 50/400 if you're going to be in variable lighting conditions. Now, to me, this is where we get a little bit amateur in our footage, as you typically want your exposure to stay the same. So in best case scenario, set your ISO to 50 so that you have a steady lighting condition. If you guys want to learn all about how to actually understand how to expose your cameras properly, whether it's the Osmo Pocket 3 or the cameras that you use on a daily basis for photography, I've actually created a course just on this so that you guys can learn the basics of your camera and how to expose properly. I'll link it down below, but it's a 60-minute course. If you guys are spending $1,500 to $2,000 or more on a camera body, spend 60 minutes and actually learn how to use all the functions on that camera and actually understand how to take creative control of those decisions, like aperture, ISO, shutter speed, focus modes, shutter options. There's so much to this camera that maybe you don't understand, so take advantage of this course. Right now you can use the code EARLYBIRD30 to get 30% off that course. So the fifth point, now that we have all of our manual exposure settings set, you might have run into an issue where you've hit all these settings, you're outside, and this screen is way too bright. Or the exposure meter is telling you that you are plus 2.7, or you're plus way too much, and you actually aren't exposed properly. This is where you need to set ND filters, because our constant aperture of 2 does not change. You cannot change this aperture and close it down, which you can do on normal cameras. We've already set our shutter speed to 1/50 so that we can get that nice blurry road. We don't want to change that either. We've already set our ISO at 50, which is the lowest it can go. So that means we need to start throwing shade on our lens. And I don't mean like negative shade, like literally sunglasses. So you can pick up ND filters. I've picked up the K and F filters. I'm not sponsored by them at all. I just bought them because they're cheap and they have a CPL attached to the ND. Now what ND filters do is when you are shooting in outside bright conditions, you can put those ND filters on your camera and then you can keep your settings how you need to and then add the shade onto the front of your lens to make sure that you can keep correct exposure. Add as many filters as you need or the correct number to get your exposure meter, which is in the top right hand corner of your camera here, to 0.0. You can actually push that exposure meter slightly above 0, but that's the camera just telling you that the range is happiest right in that middle at 0.0. You can push it above, you can push it below, but 0.0 is your goal, at least to start. So you should have all your settings correct at this point, and you want to probably mount this to a car. What the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 allows you to do is mount this camera to the back of a car, and then you can start tracking the subject. So you can essentially shoot as a solo shooter, and it opens up so many possibilities for people like you and me. Now, I reached out to Mmax, and they sent me their Mmax Blade. If you guys haven't seen this on the internet yet, it's a pretty sweet little device, and actually way more affordable than I thought it was going to be, because it's a really solidly built piece of equipment with a really solid suction cup. So what this does is you then suction this onto the back of your vehicle or whichever vehicle you're filming out of. You can press the suction until the red line is gone, and then it's got a really solid connection, and you're actually going to be able to trust this because the Osmo Pocket 3 really doesn't weigh that much. Once you got this thing locked in, you can then see that this is going to take a lot of those big bounces out of the road, which is super helpful. I think because the price point is so reasonable on this, it's difficult to get, unfortunately, but if you can get your hands on one of these, this is going to be a really good option for your Osmo Pocket 3 or your GoPro or your 360 camera or whatever you want to mount, and this will help kind of take out some of those extra vibrations on the back of a car. As you can see in the footage here, it does a pretty darn good job. Unless you hit some solid potholes, this thing's going to keep your footage looking buttery smooth. There is a link for this down below. There is no discount, unfortunately, because they keep this so reasonably priced. I did ask them and they said their stock is coming back, so it should be shipping faster, hopefully for all of you guys that are looking at getting this. Now, there's one last thing you guys need to do before you can get these buttery smooth rollers, and that is connect to the Mimo app. What the Mimo app does is obviously it connects to the camera. You can line up your shot, and then very easily you can start tracking the car. Once you connect to the Mimo app, it's really easy to see what's on screen. It's essentially like a beautiful monitor. You can change settings and make sure that everything is looking good. Make sure your exposure is proper. See if you need to adjust your ND filter, for example. And then you can start tracking your vehicle. Now, this is what makes it so easy for content creators like you and me, is that we can one-man shoot. If you have a car mount for your phone, you can see and monitor this while you're driving. So it works really, really well. I was able to control the gimbal from someone else's car while I was driving. Not sure if I totally recommend that, but be safe, you know, have fun. It is honestly better than us hanging out car windows with our expensive camera gear. Now you should have everything that you guys need to get buttery smooth rollers. And if you guys are looking to take your camera skills just a little further, check out that course I made for you down below. Use the code EARLYBIRD30 30. Check it out. I think it'll help you guys a ton. I really enjoyed making it. I go a lot deeper than I can here on the YouTube videos. If you guys enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the channel, liking it down below for me because it helps me out a ton. And you might like that video there. I love making car content for you guys. And I hope I will see you in the next one. Peace.